everyone, AMR back again with another video. So in today's episode, I will be recapping all of the Week 2 games that happened in the NFL. So there's a lot to jump into here. We have a ton of games. Go ahead, sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to be covering everything you need to know that happened in Week 2, as well as to what to expect, how this will affect Week 3, and so on and so forth. Later on tomorrow, I will be uploading a video on the Thursday Night Football preview. And then Saturday morning, I'm going to be uploading a injury report for games that you can expect to have players that are not going to be healthy for the Sunday games. But as always, if you like today's content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Helps out a ton. For the first one here, we have the New England Patriots at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this game went a little bit different than a lot of people probably suspected. There was a ton of skepticism as to whether or not the Pittsburgh's defense could hold off the New England Patriots without the likes of TJ Watt. And then also with Najee Harris being kind of banged up, we didn't really know how he was going to be utilized in this affair. So in historical games, this is typically the Tom Brady versus Ben Roethlisberger game, but it's kind of cool to see that we're in a different stage in the football world now. We have Mac Jones, went 21 for 35, 252, 1-1. Pretty light showing for him, but that being said, he was questionable most of the week with a back injury. He kind of got sandwiched in Week 1, and so I would say that this was actually a very good scoreline considering the circumstances. The biggest thing that is going to be the biggest thing that I'm going to be looking out for here in Week 3 is the utilization of Damian Harris, given how he finished this game. So on the last drive of the game where he just had to pick up a first down and the game was pretty much sealed, the Patriots could go ahead and knee out the clock. He got injured with his left knee. It doesn't sound like it's serious. I don't think he's listed as questionable for the affair, but it'll be interesting to see if Ramondre Stevenson takes a step up in the utilization in the absence of Damian Harris trying to get back to like a fully healthy guy. He's obviously their lead back. They're going to do everything they can to get him healthy. Biggest contributors on this offense is going to be Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers. One thing that kind of shocked the world is that Devontae Parker had 0 targets in this game. If you have him, go ahead and cut him. Hunter Henry also had 0 targets. This was a stunner to me. I thought Hunter Henry was going to be a smash play against Pittsburgh. Didn't actually end up getting the ball at all or even seeing the ball. And so I think that the biggest thing to take away here is that between Aguilar and Myers, they had a total of 205 yards and 1 touchdown. New England is not known to be a pass-heavy team without Tom Brady, and so I would definitely take this with a grain of salt. I love to see Mac Jones take a huge step in this game, but that's really all you can glean from this. I don't know if Nelson Aguilar is going to be a consistent player. Jacoby Myers has been very good, but he just struggles to get in the end zone. It took him like 2 years before he got his first touchdown. Flipping over to the Steelers side, you got Mitch Trubisky, who had 21 for 33, 168, 1-1. Very similar stat line to Mac Jones. However, he had far fewer yards through the air, almost about 100 less yards, which is crazy. This is a team that has so many star wideouts. They have Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth at tight end. There's really no reason why their quarterback should not be getting around 300 yards every single game, unless you have former Bear, Mitch Trubisky. So I think that this Pittsburgh Steelers defense or offense is going to be just as good as Mitch Trubisky can lead them. I do not see this having a very good outlook on fantasy for the Steelers. Najee Harris, 15 carries for 49 yards, 3.5 on average, so not really all that great. He didn't score in this one, so that would have saved his stat line, but since he didn't, he had a very lackluster type game, especially for where he's going in draft capital. And so, I mean, I really don't know what to make of this. The only person who actually had a touchdown in this game was Pat Freiermuth for the Steelers. The other one came, I believe, on a pick 6 to Minkah Fitzpatrick. So I think that is correct. Let me go ahead and vet that really quick. Yeah, it looks like the only other score that came from this game was a pick 6 by Minkah Fitzpatrick, which well-deserved. He's a phenomenal safety in the NFL. And looking at Deontay Johnson, 6 for 57. It's encouraging to see him getting six receptions right now, but the matter of the fact is when Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback, he was getting around 10 to 11 targets a game, and that's just not the case anymore. So temper expectations there. Najee Harris getting 5 receptions in the passing game. Very optimistic. I'd love to see that. But the biggest one here is for me is George Pickens getting 1 reception for 23 yards. They're going to ease him into the offense, but I would have expected him to be getting a little bit more targets. So I'm a little confused on that front. So next up on our docket here, we have the Carolina Panthers at the New York Giants. So this is one of those games where you really didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't know if Baker Mayfield was going to take a huge step up and overcome the obstacles that a lot of people have kind of written him off as the quarterback for Carolina, or was it going to be a complete implosion of the New York Giants and literally anyone could beat the team. So very different outcome, very hard to project in this one. Let's start with the Panthers. So Baker Mayfield, 14 for 29, 145 and 1. This is horrible. If you have any stock in any people on this team, including Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion, it's not looking great. Christian McCaffrey did have a very good game, 15 for 102, but that is not where you drafted him. So I don't know. I think that 15 through 102 is very acceptable, given that if it were any other running back, we'd be very happy with this. The fact that it's Christian McCaffrey, a top 3 overall pick in most drafts, really more like a top 2 pick in most drafts, getting only 102 yards, not seeing the end zone, and then only getting 4 receptions through the air. That's where he's made a lot of his value as far as like what he does for fantasy. And so him not getting in the end zone at all, typically you'd see him get maybe 50 to 60 yards rushing and then 50 to 60 yards through the air and then a pair of touchdowns, and you'd be completely fine. Baker Mayfield really does seem to be a piece of this offense that is really lacking at the moment. I think that he will figure it out, but for the time being, it is pretty putrid to go ahead and watch this team play football. You got DJ Moore, 3 for 43 and a touchdown. That saved his week. Robbie Anderson cooled off after a very hot week 1. He's now to 3 and 32. I think you're going to see that more consistently. Over on the Giants side, you had Daniel Jones, 22 for 34, 176 and 1. What is with these quarterbacks this week? The ones that really took a big step did, and then most of these people, I mean, they're just getting 22, 23-ish completions, and they're getting sub 200 yards. That's awful. I don't know how else to say it. Saquon Barkley had very high expectations. Well, who wouldn't after he had the week 1 that he had? He got about half the yards as he did in week 1, almost half, and he still had 72. So he's had 21 carries for 72 yards. Daniel Jones here, 10 for 21. That is a very interesting stat line given the fact that he had 10 rushing attempts. I think that's pretty awesome. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. What I don't like is that he had an average of 2.1 per carry. Typically, when you have a quarterback, you want to see that number 8 or 9 a carry. But, I mean, take what you can get when you have Daniel Jones under center. One of the biggest things that surprised the hell out of me is that Richie James led this receiving corps this weekend. Richie James, afterthought of the San Francisco 49ers, is now on the New York Giants, and he caught 5 receptions for 51 yards, did not get in the end zone. And then you got Kenny Galladay, who didn't even get a reception. You had Sterling Shepard, 6 for 34. Saquon, 3 for 16. And then Kadarius Toney had 2 receptions for 0 yards. What is going on with this team? You have so much star power on this offense, and they're just not able to do anything with it. If the offense could bring half as much to the table as what the defense brings week in and week out, I think that this team would actually be a very good contender. But the matter of the fact is that they have Daniel Jones at quarterback, who doesn't know how to take care of the football. He fumbles all the time. He throws picks, and he just doesn't have a nose for leading the receivers in the right direction. I don't know if it's a wide receiver coach problem or if it's a talent problem, but it doesn't appear to be a talent problem on paper. Giants were able to go ahead and escape with a victory here, 19-16. I think that was a very much indicative of the opponent and not necessarily what the Giants were able to execute on their end. Next up on our list here, you have the rather exciting New York Jets at the Cleveland Browns. So it seemed like this game was completely wrapped up in the fourth quarter. Nick Chubb had an opportunity to go ahead and just fall on the ground, and then the game would have been over in that sense. But instead, he scored the touchdown, giving the New York Jets an opportunity to go ahead and get back into the game, which they did, and they actually won. So a lot of people are trying to say Nick Chubb should have just fell down. And Nick Chubb's response was, I thought the game was over. They were already up by a score at that point. And so for him to fall down on the ground and whatnot, sure, you could say that, but wouldn't another touchdown on top of a one-score game also put you out of reach? I completely understand both sides of the argument. I don't know. Maybe it's a learning thing that they'll go ahead and try and implement in the future. Like if they're up in the fourth quarter, just fall down instead of scoring another touchdown. Who really knows? But let's go ahead and look at the Jets. So Joe Flacco, 26 for 44, 307-4. Crazy stat. He has over 100 attempts through the air, and that's through 2 weeks. He's leading the NFL, and I think it's about like 12 or 13 attempts. It's ridiculous. So very good week by Joe Flacco. I love what I see. And Zach Wilson is not going to be out there for week 3, so you can go ahead and expect Joe Flacco to be out there yet again. I don't think that the team is up in arms about that at all with the way that he's been playing. Breece Hall, 7 for 50. Michael Carter, 7 for 23. And then Joe Flacco, he got out there too, 2 for 6. That's kind of ridiculous. But the biggest contributor on this team last week was going to be Garrett Wilson, 8 for 102 and 2. The guy was phenomenal. If you had a chance to go ahead and take a look at the game, he was leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else on the field. He just looks like a superstar out there. Of course, he only averaged about 12.8 reception, but that's totally fine. If he's getting 8 receptions and he's averaging like 13 yards a reception, he's going to have very good weeks, and he's going to have very consistently good weeks. Was able to get 2 touchdowns on top of it all, which just cemented him as being one of the best wide receivers on week 2. Corey Davis, 2 for 83 and 1. What that tells me right there is that those were very streaky type receptions. Trying to replicate week in and week out 2 for 83 is going to be damn near impossible. What I like to see is consistency. Elijah Moore, 3 for 41, averaging 13.7 a reception. I love to see those type of numbers, but averaging 41.5 on a reception, definitely not good. I think he had a big bomb play that ended up scoring up in a touchdown, and so that definitely skews out his average. But all in all, I think it was a very good game by the Jets. And let's flip over to the Browns, because the Browns are interesting here. Jacoby Brissett, 22 for 27, 229, 1-1. For a guy who only has 5 incompletions on 27 attempts, you need to be throwing the ball more. He's definitely taking care of the football. He's got talent at the wideout position. He's got backs who can both catch the football. But maybe it was just game script dependent. Nick Chubb, 17 for 87 and 3 touchdowns. Phenomenal. Anytime your lead running back in the NFL can average over 5 yards per attempt, you have a very, very good chance of winning most of your games. Nick Chubb averaging 5.1. His backup, Kareem Hunt, he's not really a backup, more like a 1B. He got 13 for 58 and 4.5 per attempt. So between their 2 running backs, they're getting nearly 5 yards every single time they hand the ball off, which is phenomenal. Nick Chubb getting 3 touchdowns is insane. And again, hard to replicate, but you got to love those weeks. Amari Cooper, 9 for 101 and 1. So finally, Browns fans are feeling like they actually got some type of a value in this trade. Week 1, he was very quiet. There was a lot of concern about whether or not that it was worth the investment that they put into him. Him getting 9 receptions, unbelievable. Donovan Peoples-Jones, who had 11 targets in week 1, has 0 receptions in week 2. I think you can go ahead and cut ties with Donovan Peoples-Jones. He may have a couple weeks here and here. He may have a couple weeks here and there that will go ahead and try and replicate what he did in week 1. But by and large, it seems like this team is going to really try and hammer down into buying into their superstars, which will be Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and Amari Cooper. Now, that being said, if you have David Njoku, what do? I really don't know at this point. I have him in a couple of my fantasy leagues as well. I'm kind of stuck because I know that the athleticism is there. I just don't know if the coaching staff wants to target the tight end. David Njoku, he just signed a big contract. He got 3 receptions for 32 yards, no touchdowns. It just seems like wasted capital, in my opinion. If you're not going to utilize the tight end, get like a very good blocking tight end and then just disregard it as part of your receiving core. But the Jets went ahead and got this victory, 31-30 after an onside recovery, and then went ahead and scored again. I think that this was like the highlight of week 2, in my opinion, and it was just an all-around fun game to watch if you're not a Browns fan. So switching gears here to the Indianapolis Colts at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So unbeknownst to a lot of people, I actually kind of saw this one happening. Like there was a lot of people who were like, "Oh, well, the Colts haven't won in Jacksonville for like 7 straight consecutive games. Like, is it going to be another repeat? I don't know." Everyone thinks that the Colts are going to be like this high and mighty team and that they're going to be looking to get back in the win column after tying in week 1. Then people on the other side are like Jacksonville. They're like, yeah, Jacksonville was a terrible team last year, but they showed life in the first week. They lost, but they showed life, and we didn't really know what to expect. I was calling this the whole way. In my FanDuel lineups, I started Jacksonville defense across the board. They were the cheapest defense on the entire front, and I started them everywhere. So Jacksonville has always had the Colts number. I don't think it's really quarterback dependent. They've had Phillip Rivers. They've had Carson Wentz. Now they have Matt Ryan, and all of them have failed to get a win in Jacksonville. So let's go ahead and take a deeper look at this game. You got Matt Ryan, 16 for 30 and 3 picks with 195 yards. Not a good game by any means. So Matt Ryan struggled to get the ball moving a lot in this game. He was without his star wide receiver of Michael Pittman Jr., and it really kind of showed. On the other hand, you have a star running back in Jonathan Taylor who got 9 carries for 54 yards and averaging 6 a carry. Like I said, you love to see anything above 5 a carry for attempt-wise, and he was getting that. The problem is that they were just so far behind in this game right out of the gate that they had to try and abandon their strongest asset, which is running the football. Ashton Doolin, he had a very good game, 5 for 79. I think that was a huge step. He had glimpses last season of him being that, flyer streamer pick. He could get like 3-4 receptions for about like 50-ish yards. And so him taking another good step in the absence of Michael Pittman Jr. is phenomenal. You love to see that. And then Jonathan Taylor, only 1 for 9 through the air. It does not seem like this team really values passing to the running back in games that they are down. There's definitely brighter days ahead for this team. I think more concern has to be on that Indianapolis Colts defense, who they really should have been able to single-handedly shut Jacksonville down. I don't really understand how a team like Jacksonville, who is good, they're talented, but they should have been so outmatched when it comes to the Indianapolis defense. Jaguars on offense here, you have Trevor Lawrence, 25 for 30, 235 and 2. You couldn't really ask for a better performance from him, especially in a game script where they were ahead early and often, literally the whole game. So him still getting 30 attempts to the air is phenomenal. James Robinson, in his second straight game, having a very good fantasy week. 23 carries, 64 yards, 1 touchdown. The biggest concern here is that he had 2.8 a carry. That is not good, especially when he had a 37-yard touchdown run. You really hate to see a guy getting that much work and not doing anything with it. So I'm willing to bet that they're going to start looking at getting a 50-50 back split between James Robinson and Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne was 9 for 20, no touchdowns. I think ultimately the Colts kind of knew that they were going to start running the football because Jacksonville was ahead and they just wanted to burn the clock. So they were able to shut down that running back room. I wouldn't read too much into this, but it's just something to note. In the receiving core, Christian Kirk, he's obviously the wide receiver 1 at this point. He had a very good week 1 and followed it up with a phenomenal week 2, getting in the end zone twice, 6 receptions for 78 yards. The biggest surprise here has to be Evan Engram, 7 for 46. So he was kind of an afterthought when he was with New York. And a lot of people kind of just said that, after his injury, he's just not a good tight end anymore. He's always banged up. He's just not utilized. And now in Jacksonville, he's kind of showing that he has a lot of life left in him. So 7 for 46, definitely one of those guys you can target on your waiver wire if he's still available. And then everyone else in this list kind of was just getting the workload where it was needed. Like you had Zay Jones, 3 for 23, Travis Etienne, 3 for 33, Marvin Jones, 3 for 33. They were just passing the ball around at such a good rate that it didn't really matter who was getting the workload. It's because they were scoring so much. All right, and so for our next game here, you have the Miami Dolphins at the Baltimore Ravens. So this was the game that we all hoped it would be. It wasn't always that way. for the majority of the game, it seemed like it was going to be a very one-sided affair. So at one point, you just had the Baltimore Ravens who were up by 21 points. That's crazy. So the fact that this game even became a game is unbelievable. It was an all-out, drag-out type of a game. You had Dolphins winning 42-38. On the Dolphins side, you had Tua Tagovailoa, who had probably his best game ever, even college concerned probably. 36 for 50, 469, and 6 touchdowns. 2 picks, though. I wouldn't read too much into the picks when you got numbers like that. Passing for 50 attempts is a ton. On the rushing side, Raheem Mostert, 11 for 51, 4.6 a carry, very close. Chase Edmonds, 5 for 33, 6.5 a carry. You gotta love that. And then on the receiving core, this is where they really made their money. Tyreek Hill, 11 for 190 and 2. Jalen Waddle, 11 for 171 and 2. Mike Gesicki, 4 for 41 and 1. So this receiving core is very scary. Tua Tagovailoa has shown us that, at least in the first 2 weeks, that he can utilize the speed of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So I really don't have any concerns for this team. I think that even if they do give up a lot of points, like you saw in this affair, they have the star power on their offensive side to make up for that. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Ravens. So Lamar Jackson, 21 for 29, 318, and 3. I really like the average depth of completion. I don't really know what that number is right now. I don't have it, the average, but 21 completions for 318 yards. That's pretty phenomenal. He's got 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. Lamar Jackson, 9 for 119 and 1. Couldn't really ask for much more from the guy. He had a very good week, 13.2 per attempt rushing the football. That's phenomenal. The rest of the running backs, the next highest was 16. So I don't really understand what was going on in this game. You have Rashad Bateman, 4 for 108 and 1. Rashad Bateman, his second week in a row getting a long touchdown. So this could just be a Jamar Chase situation where he just gets a lot of his money through the air and he doesn't really get shut down. And so this might be something to monitor in the weeks to come. Mark Andrews, 9 for 104 and 1. Love to see the tight end finally getting involved after a very, very slow start in week 1. And then on the other side, you have Devin Duvernay, 2 for 42 and 0. He got a little banged up at the end of that play, or at the end of one of his receptions. So go ahead and monitor his situation going here into week 3. Okay, so for our next game up here, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the New Orleans Saints. Tampa Bay was able to win this one 20-10. Tom Brady, 18 for 34, 190 and 1. A very lackluster game in comparison to Tom Brady standards. He was actually shown as like completely yelling at all of his teammates and stuff. He was having a really tough go, and the only reason that this Buccaneers team was able to come out on top was due to Jameis Winston having so many interceptions. One of them was a pick 6. Tampa Bay's defense was absolutely on against the New Orleans Saints. So big concern here at the running back position. You have Leonard Fournette, 24 for 65 at 2.7 a carry. That is not good by Leonard Fournette standards. Anytime you get 24 attempts, you really want to see that number be closer to 100. 100 would even be kind of like, it's an okay stat. 24 is a lot. You should be doing very, very well in that case. Mike Evans, 3 for 61 before getting ejected. And then he is also going to be missing week 3, so make your adjustments accordingly. I feel like if Julio Jones is out there, he's going to be a slam dunk pick. Same thing goes for Chris Godwin. I really think that the team is kind of depleted at the wide receiver position right now. A lot of guys are banged up. And this is like one of the most deepest wide receiving teams in the entire league. Russell Gage, 5 for 28. Love to see that he's getting a lot of receptions. Would just like to see a little bit more yardage associated with that. And then let's go over here to the New Orleans Saints. So the New Orleans Saints here, you have Jameis Winston going 25 for 40 for 236, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Not a good game by any means. So Jameis Winston is well known for throwing a lot of interceptions in his career. I think he did it quite a lot, and I want to say it was 2015 or 2017. Don't really remember. He was on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, oddly enough, and he threw so many interceptions. It was like close to like 50 or something. And so he's got to take better care of the ball. So Jameis Winston, as a report came out later on, stated that he has 4 fractures in his back that he was playing with, and it's kind of baffling to see that he was able to do as well as what he did, given the fractures in his back. He got sacked a ton, an absolute ton in this game. Mark Ingram, 10 for 58. Alvin Kamara was a scratch start in this one, so if you were fortunate enough to catch that in time and be able to make the adjustment appropriately, congratulations. If not, totally understandable. It was a game time decision. So Mark Ingram, 10 for 58, 5.8 a carry. Not too bad from a guy who's really not known for being a world beater on the ground. Looking over here at the wide receiver room, Chris Olave stepping up again, 5 for 80. What you really need to be concerned about here is the Jarvis Landry, 4 for 25. After having a really good week 1, this is really not the start that you want to see after that. And then Juwan Johnson, 4 for 40. Michael Thomas, 6 for 65 and 1. This seems like Michael Thomas is back to his normal self, at least so far. I think that if he doesn't score, we're having a different conversation, but he did score, and he scored twice last week. We could see the guy having a nose for the end zone yet again. All right, so jumping over to another fun matchup, we had Carson Wentz visiting Jared Goff, Washington Commanders at Detroit Lions. Lions were able to come out victorious here, 36-27, but the game really was a lot closer than it should have been. So up until the third quarter, the Washington Commanders hadn't scored a single point. And at that point, I believe that the Detroit Lions were up by 22. I think it was 22-0. And then all of a sudden, the Detroit defense came out very flat in the second half. Luckily, the offense was able to still score. I think they scored 14 points in the second half. Luckily, because they probably would have ended up losing this game if they hadn't. Carson Wentz, 30 for 46. 337, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. It was a very good game for Carson Wentz. So it started out really poor. There was a lot of worry happening there in the first half, but Carson Wentz caught his groove and he just was able to do what he's been doing. It's kind of baffling to see that he's had back-to-back 300-plus yard passing games. I think he's got 7 touchdowns in the first 2 games. It's definitely not sustainable up to this point. But then again, that NFC East is a very putrid type position. You could see him doing this over and over again as the season goes on. Antonio Gibson, 14 for 28 and 1 touchdown. This is a scary stat line. The fact that Antonio Gibson had 14 attempts, 2 on the ground, or 2 as a 2 yards per carry, is really bad. Him scoring saved his entire stat line. Now you might say he's also known for catching passes. He was 2 for 13 through the air. Nothing to write home about. Curtis Samuel, 1 for 21. So it's probably one of those end around plays. Not really something that you want to go ahead and rely on a week-to-week basis. Curtis Samuel through the air, however, 7 for 78 and a touchdown. He's really been the hottest receiver on this team so far. Terry McLaurin, 4 for 75. This is the guy who got paid in the offseason. You'd expect him to be stepping up as that wide receiver 1, but he really hasn't just quite yet. I think he will. It's just going to need a little bit more time with Carson Wentz. And then Jahan Dotson, another really good game here for 4 for 59 and a touchdown. You love to see that out of a rookie wide receiver. I think that Jahan Dotson might be the best rookie wide receiver so far in his class. That being said, Christian Watson did very, very well in the New York Jets game, but Jahan Dotson has shown consistency, and consistency is key in the NFL. Switching over to the Lions, you have Jared Goff going 20 for 34, 256, and 4 touchdowns. Another banger game. He was playing lights out in that first half. Played pretty well in the second half too. I mean, he was completing a lot. I mean, he was shy of 300 yards, but he still had 4 touchdowns passing. It was just a very dominant game from a Detroit Lions perspective. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 2 for 68 on the ground. Unbelievable. DeAndre Swift, 5 for 56 on the ground. Kind of scary given the fact that he had only 5 attempts there. It seems like he's been battling a little bit of an injury, and that's why you see Jamal Williams here with 12 for 53. But here's where the Detroit Lions really made their money. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 9 for 116 and 2. Absolute phenomenal showing from Amon-Ra yet again. So it's 2 weeks in a row now. I think it's something like 8 weeks of 8 or more receptions or something like that. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute slam dunk in fantasy right now. If you are able to get him on the cheap, you are winning big. So congratulations there. DeAndre Swift, 2 for 31 and a touchdown through the air. Josh Reynolds kind of had another touchdown there, but really nothing to write home about. TJ TJ Hawkinson is definitely one of those names that you need to kind of sound the alarm on. 3 for 26. This is a guy that is supposed to be one of the top 8 tight ends in the entire NFL, and he just is not being utilized to his full potential. So if you're a Hawkinson owner, go ahead and try and trade him away. I think that there's just better options out there at this point. Okay, so the Seattle Seahawks are visiting the San Francisco 49ers. So a lot of people thought that this game might be a little bit closer than what it was actually ended up being. Trey Lance, horrific injury, out for season, broke his ankle, very similar injury as the Dak Prescott that happened to him a couple of years ago. Really sucks. And this was a game that was pretty much out of reach right from the get-go for the Seahawks. You have Geno Smith going 24 for 30, 197 and 1 interception. Very bad outing after a solid week 1 performance. Rashad Penny, 6 for 15. 6 for 15. That's horrible. Ken Walker, 4 for 10. This is just really, really bad showing on the ground. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, going into halftime, they were down 20-0. So the running game just had to be abandoned. And then that's why you see Tyler Lockett here go 9 for 107. Now, there's a lot of fantasy owners out there right now scratching their head. They're probably more like pulling their hair out at this point about what to do with DK Metcalf. 4 for 35 is... I have no words. Like, this guy has the peak athleticism when it comes to the wide receiver position, and he's not being utilized that way. I have no idea. Sound the alarm, sell him for the cheap, get rid of him. I think that's not necessarily an overreaction to a 2-game sample size. He's just not getting the yardage. Even if he got the 7 receptions in week 1, he managed to get like 40 yards receiving in that game. Like, it's not a good showing here. DK Metcalf, you gotta abandon ship while you still can. 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo, 13 for 21, 154 and 1. As I mentioned earlier, Trey Lance, horrible season-ending injury. He was 2 for 3 and 30 yards passing. He was out within the first quarter. It was really kind of like a freakish thing. Hate to see it. Jeff Wilson Jr., 18 for 84. No touchdowns, but definitely love to see the ability to go ahead and progress on the ground. He had 4.7 a carry, which is fantastic when you compare him to the likes of Tyron Davis-Price, who had 14 for 33, averaging 2.5 a carry. So I really think that the combination between Jeff Wilson, as long as he can stay healthy, and Deebo Samuel in the backfield, who went 4 for 53, is going to be the right combination that this team is really looking forward to. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo, he did score in the game on a rushing attempt. He carried the ball 4 times. I think a lot of those are goal line, given the fact that he only had 5 yards in the ground. Brandon Ayuk, 5 for 63, led the receiving room. Deebo Samuel, 5 for 44. Did not score in the contest. You saw Jeff Wilson get a little bit involved in the passing game, 2 receptions for 19. George Kittle, another scratch start. I think that he plays this week, but I thought the same thing last week. So go ahead and temper your expectations. You're on this bumpy road, but when he's on, he's in your lineup, and he's one of the best tight ends in the entire NFL. You just kind of have to wait out the storm. You have to trust in the process here and understand that the 49ers is a team that just keeps on getting banged up, and that with a guy like George Kittle, they're not willing to just sacrifice one game to go ahead and just get him out there. They want to make sure that he's healthy and that he can stay on the field. So next up here, you have the Atlanta Falcons at the Los Angeles Rams. So this game actually turned out to be somewhat interesting. The Rams kind of had this one sealed and sewn up going into the fourth quarter, but the Atlanta Falcons really made a push. 17 points in the fourth quarter for Atlanta and only 3 from the Rams. So it really was turning out to be one of those games where we don't really know who's going to win this. It seemed like the Rams defense was kind of imploding. The Rams offense got into this point of being just like a stalled position. And then the Atlanta Falcons were just finding ways to score the football. Marcus Mariota, 17 for 26, 196, 2 and 2. Not a great performance from Marcus Mariota, but at the end of the day, 196 yards it's pretty bad. But when you combine that with the fact that he's going to do the rushing attempts, he had 6 attempts for 16 yards. Not what you want, but he had much more efficiency on the ground last game. The 2 touchdown passes is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. The 2 interceptions kind of negates a lot of that progress given the lack of yardage. So Marcus Mariota is a very very risky pick in most leagues. Now, all things being considered, this is probably a point in time where you kind of might want to try and get rid of Marcus Mariota if you can. The Atlanta Falcons have a very tough schedule coming up here with playing Cleveland, Tampa Bay. The Atlanta Falcons have a very tough schedule coming up. This week they play Seahawks. Great. It's an awesome matchup if you want to go ahead and play him in that one. But then he has the Cleveland Browns. They have the Cleveland Browns. They have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have the 49ers, the Bengals, and then they're back at the Panthers. But that's a whole month away. So I really think that you need to go ahead and sell as much as you can at this. Cordell Patterson, 10 for 41 on the ground, averaging right around 4 a carry. Not a bad game in which he was trying to get the ball going against the Rams. The Rams are a very good defense. The fact that he was almost able to get 4.5 a carry is pretty outstanding for a guy who's been past his prime for the last couple of years, but still finding ways to get the job done. Drake London, 8 for 86 and 1. Drake London, he's right up there with that, premier rookie wide receiver class, and I really think that they're showing everything that they can with this guy. The big concern for me is Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, 2 for 19. This is just pretty much unacceptable for a guy of his caliber. Kyle Pitts should be one of those guys who is talked about as one of the greater tight ends in the league, and right now he's making a lot of people sweat. So something to monitor here in the next week is make sure Kyle Pitts is getting opportunities, and then continue to watch the progression of Cordell Patterson. But again, after this week against the Seahawks, go ahead and temper your expectations moving forward. Rams. So you got Stafford, 27 for 36, 272, 3 and 2. Love to see the 3 touchdowns. Don't really like to see the 2 interceptions though. I'm surprised that he's not been able to get over 300 yards in this contest because he has Cooper Kupp. He had Allen Robinson getting more involved. Tyler Higbee was still getting a ton of receptions. Week 1, Tyler Higbee had 11 targets. This week, he has 7 receptions for 71. Cooper Kupp, 11 for 108 and 2. Allen Robinson, 4 for 53 and 1. Allen Robinson had a second touchdown that got called back, and then Cooper Kupp scored it. So very close to having a very big week from Allen Robinson. Darnell, Darrell Henderson, 10 for 47 and 1. Cam Akers, 15 for 44. So I really think that this is kind of not even a debate at this point. I think Darrell Henderson is the RB1 in the room right now. Cam Akers is just not showing that explosivity. And so you have to go ahead and move on if you're a fantasy owner of Cam Akers. I think the time has passed. Okay, so we go to Las Vegas now, where the Arizona Cardinals are going into Vegas. They ended up winning this game 29-23 in an absolute thriller. So the way that this game ended is that the Arizona Cardinals had scored. They're down by 2, and they go for a 2-point conversion that Kyler Murray ends up running 84 yards over the course of 21 seconds. The Vegas defense was not able to contain him, and he was able to get around the outside, ran in for the end around, and scored the 2-point conversion, tying the game. And then, as you've probably seen, Hunter Renfrow caught a pass, turns upfield, gets lit up, ball pops out, and then Byron Murphy runs down the sideline in for the score. So it was a very fun game to watch near the end, but a very concerning game if you're a Cardinal fan to watch throughout. Kyler Murray, 31 for 49, 277, 1 and 1. A lot of those yardage came in the second half, late in the second half, I might add you. So Kyler Murray is off to a pretty shaky start here. Very, very close to starting the year 0-2, and honestly, I think that they should have. Darrell Williams, 8 for 59 and 1. Like to see it in the absence of James Conner, who exited with an ankle injury. Does not sound like it's serious. It sounds like he's going to suit up in the next week. I think it was more of a precautionary thing. And then Zach Ertz, 8 for 75, no touchdowns. Marquise Brown, 6 for 68. And Greg Dortch, 4 for 55 and 1. This guy has shown a ton of promise, being a later round guy who probably went undrafted in a lot of leagues. So go ahead and target him in the waiver wire if he's still out there. Anytime you have a receiving room that's being led by Zach Ertz is not a good sign right now. So abandon ship if you can. Raiders. So Raiders, 25 for 39, 252 and 2 with no interceptions. Honestly, not a terrible game from Derek Carr. It's really hard to argue that he could do much more in this contest. This is just like a few key fumbles that happened and really kind of cost him the game. So it's kind of out of his hands. I think that the 252 is a fine number for Derek Carr. 2 touchdowns. We'd love to see it get up a little bit more like in 3, but the fact that he's scoring touchdowns at all, the fact that he's able to score touchdowns at all is definitely a step in the right direction. So Josh Jacobs, 19 for 69, did not score in the contest. Kind of starting to get a little concerned with Josh Jacobs. He had an okay week 1, but you really got to see the guy do more. Like he's not being efficient enough. Mac Hollins, surprisingly, 5 for 66, led the receiving room. Kind of wild that Devontae Adams only had 2 receptions in this game, 2 for 12 and 1. He did score a 1-yard touchdown pass, so that saved his fantasy week a little bit. Probably not to most owners because they're probably expecting him to have a 20-ish point week after week 1 where he kind of exploded. Darren Waller, 6 for 51 and a score. Nice to see the guy get back in the end zone. He's had a very slow last year and a half, and so it's nice to see him get in the end zone. Hunter Renfrow, he was not really utilized at all in this game until the second half where he started to get caught up, but he fumbled the ball twice, cost him the game. I think he's right now in concussion protocol. He kind of got lit up a little bit. 7 for 59, did not score. So now we take a trip to the Mile High City where Houston is visiting the Broncos. Broncos are one of those teams right now where they're very, very frustrating as a fantasy owner. So much star power. The things are just not clicking. I don't know what's going on, but Denver's still able to win this game 16-9 against a team like the Houston Texans. This game should have been 40-0 Broncos, but instead it was a very interesting game. Interesting and not a fun contest. They were down 9-6 going into the fourth quarter, so hate to see that. Davis Mills, 19 for 38, 177, did not throw a touchdown, did not throw an interception. You just got to be better. I understand that you're going to be up against it every single game when you play for the Texans as their quarterback, especially being this guy who is thought of as like a later draft pick, Stanford standout, who is just a backup for the team, and then really kind of played very well last season. He hasn't taken a step this season just quite yet. Dameon Pierce, 15 for 69. I love the fact that he's starting to get the workload. I think that is awesome. Rex Burkhead, pretty much non-existent in this game outside of the passing game. Didn't record in a single carry, so you love to see that. I feel like Dameon Pierce is going to be one of those guys that you can go ahead and stream moving forward. Now, you have at the receiving in the receiving game, you have 4 for 58 from Nico Collins and 4 for 54 from Braden Cooks. Very putrid game. I've already said it over and over again. The only scores that came on the Houston Texans side came on the foot of their kicker. So I know it was going to be a very disappointing game from a Texans perspective. So there's not really much more to talk about there. On the Broncos side, 14 for 31 from Russell Wilson. 219 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Those numbers are dog shit, and you need to be better. That's all I'm going to say on that. If he does this in week 3, I think that it's time to get out from the Russell Wilson show. It's just not panning out. Javonte Williams, 15 for 75, looks phenomenal in the backfield. Melvin Gordon, 10 for 47. Melvin Gordon, 10 for 47, 4.7 a carry. The 1-2 punch here from Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon is second to none. I think that this is a very optimistic showing from the running back room, and a lot of people thought that Melvin Gordon might get in the way of Javonte Williams, but they continue to kind of feed off of one another, which is a great sign. Courtland Sutton, 7 for 122. Awesome game. The only sad part is it came after Jerry Jeudy got injured. Jerry Jeudy came down with, I believe they're calling it a rib injury, even though it was originally thought to be like a shoulder injury. He was 1 for 11 before exiting the game. Javonte Williams, 1 for 10 in the passing game. So I think Courtland Sutton is a fine play moving forward. I think that you do need to pay attention to the KJ Hamler news. I think that he's been battling injury, and I think that as long as Jerry Jeudy's able to suit up, you can go ahead and disregard KJ Hamler. But for the meantime, go ahead and slam down on that Courtland Sutton pick. Also, take a look and see if Jerry Jeudy is going to be in the next contest. So now you have the Cincinnati Bengals going to the Dallas Cowboys. So Dallas Cowboys, as you know, lost Dak Prescott in week 1, and that didn't slow them down at all. So they did end up losing week 1, but in week 2, where you had Cooper Rush come out onto the field, they went ahead and took care of business here. They won the game 20-17 against a Bengals team that went to the Super Bowl last year. Bengals offensive line is pretty bad right now. They're just not being able to protect Joe Burrow long enough to let him actually get rid of the football and get into some space. Joe Burrow, 24 for 36, 199 and 1. Absolute terrible game. This is the same quarterback that threw for 500 yards last season in one game, and then this game he can't even get past 200 yards. So that's pretty bad. Joe Mixon, 19 for 57. Again, I think this was game script dependent. The Bengals were actually down in this contest 17-3 at halftime. So you have to imagine that they went ahead and tried to abandon the run at all costs. It wasn't working for them. I think that the Dallas Cowboys defense is good enough to shut down the running game, and so they just had to adjust their play script. That being said, so T. Higgins coming off a concussion in week 1. He goes ahead and goes out there and plays this week. Leads the receiving room, 6 for 71 and a touchdown. Jamar Chase, 5 for 54, did not score. So this is starting to be one of those things where can Higgins and Chase both succeed? I think the answer is yes. I just don't think that they can both succeed in a loss for the Bengals, unless it's like an all-out barn burner type contest. It's hard to go ahead and say that the Bengals should have won this game, given how good that Dallas defense is. The only concern here is that this Bengals defense is supposed to be pretty good too, and you let Cooper Rush go ahead and dominate you. That doesn't sound good or feel good. Let's go ahead and look at the Cowboys here. 19 for 31, 235 and 1 touchdown. Ezekiel Elliott, 15 for 53. Tony Pollard, 9 for 43 and 1. Noah Brown had a unreal game for a guy that I had never even heard of going into this game. Noah Brown, 5 for 91 and 1. CeeDee Lamb, 7 for 75. It's nice to see CeeDee Lamb get a little bit more involved than he had been. Dalton Schultz is injured right now. I think he's dealing with a PCL injury, and he may not be out there this weekend. I think that just reinforces the Noah Brown play and the CeeDee Lamb play moving forward. Taking a look here at Sunday Night Football, where you have the Chicago Bears visiting Lambeau. Chicago Bears lost this contest 10-27, so that didn't feel good as a Bears fan, as you can see above my head there. It always sucks seeing Aaron Rodgers play against the Bears. I hate the guy so much. So let's just go ahead and look at the Bears here. 7 for 11 attempts from Justin Fields for 70 yards and 1 interception. I mean, just really, dude, that is... I'm not going to talk about it because I'm still pretty upset, but that's unacceptable. David Montgomery, the one shining light on this entire freaking team, 15 for 122, averaging 8.1 a carry. Phenomenal. Khalil Herbert, 4 for 38 on the ground, 9.5. And yet they were still not able to move the football. That's fun. Equinemius St. Brown, 2 for 39. Darnell Mooney owners, get out. Cole Kmet owners, get out. Unless you don't have David Montgomery, you need to abandon ship on all Chicago personnel for the time being. This team looked so bad against this Packer defense. Aaron Rodgers, 19 for 25, 234 and 2. Aaron Jones, 15 for 132 and 1. A.J. Dillon, 18 for 61. I mean, this was a game where it really did seem like Aaron Jones kind of was having his way against this Bears defense. He also scored through the air on a 3 for 38 and 1 stat line. You had Sammy Watkins go 3 for 93. Sammy Watkins was on fire in this contest. So I'm not going to touch too much on this game. It was disappointing to say the least. One thing that I will touch on here is that Christian Watson, who missed a deep bomb in week 1 with a touchdown pass, only got 3 receptions this week for 9 yards. It's a well-known stat that if you're a rookie wide receiver with Aaron Rodgers, you have to prove yourself to get targets. And if you're going to go ahead and drop those targets when they come your way, don't expect the ball very often. So Christian Watson owners, go ahead and just cut him for now. I don't think that the time is going to be anywhere near that he actually stands out. Allen Lazard was able to play in this one, 2 for 13 and 1. I think they're trying to ease him back in slowly, and this was definitely an ease into the system again and this was definitely one of those games where you could easily ease someone back into the game where the Packers really were in control from start to finish. Moving over here to Monday night, you have the Tennessee Titans at Buffalo. So I thought that this game was going to be a little bit closer, maybe like an 18 or 14 point affair. Tennessee got whooped, 7-41. pretty much all of the backups started coming in like halfway through the third quarter. Tennessee just threw in the white flag. It was ugly. I mean, the score was 41-7 at the time that they started putting backups in. No one scored in the last quarter and a half, and it was ugly. Ryan Tannehill, 11 for 20 for 117 and 2 picks. Couldn't get the ball going. Malik Willis came in, tried to do everything to get the ball going, just didn't. 1 for 4 through the air, 1 through 4 and 6 through the air. Hassan Haskins got a ton of work because they took out Derrick Henry. 9 for 37. Derrick Henry had a very, very bad game. 13 for 25 and 1 touchdown. This Buffalo defense looks legit. I really do think that Derrick Henry does bounce back here soon, but it was not going to be against this Buffalo team. Buffalo looks way too good right now. Treylon Burks, 4 for 47. Robert Woods, 4 for 39. I think both of those are really the only guys that you can go ahead and play with any degree of confidence when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. And then looking over at the Bills, you have Josh Allen, who was 26 for 38, 317 and 4 touchdowns. Josh Allen is currently the best quarterback in football. At least he's playing like it. He's lights out, playing so well. He's very confident in his ability. And I just don't see a team being able to stop his decision-making, at least for right now. James Cook got a ton of work, 11 for 53 on the ground. Devin Singletary, 6 for 19. Definitely had a lackluster game compared to week 1. Stephon Diggs, it really was kind of the Stephon Diggs show. 12 for 143 and 3. Guy was intimate with the end zone for whatever reason. Dawson Knox, nice to see him get more involved, 4 for 41. And then Isaiah McKenzie, he got kind of a tempering workload. 2 for 37. He was expected to have a bigger game, and I think that game script just kind of went away from that. So for our final game here of week 2, you have Minnesota at Philadelphia. Minnesota lost the contest 7-24, and no one scored in the second half of the game. Like, it was literally 24-7 at halftime, and that was it. That's all she wrote. Kirk Cousins looked lost. He had 27 for 46, 221, 1 and 3 interceptions. It seemed like every single time he was just under so much pressure. I mean, at one point, the Philadelphia Eagles were just doing all-out blitzes at Kirk Cousins over and over and over, and Kirk Cousins was just blindly throwing it up in the air for a jump ball every single time. It was ugly. Anytime that you see Kirk Cousins outrush Dalvin Cook, there is a very big problem. Dalvin Cook, 6 for 17. Kirk Cousins, 2 for 20. Sound the alarm, Dalvin Cook owners, right now. I think that there's better days ahead, but for the time being, you really have to start panicking on a guy that you took early in the first round of most of your fantasy drafts. It's unexcusable for a guy of his guy. It's unexcusable for a player like him to be able to have those types of games. Adam Thielen led the receiving room, 4 for 52. If it wasn't for week 1's performance from Justin Jefferson, I'd be a lot more concerned with the stat line. But given that he did have a very good week 1, you can go ahead and just chalk it up to the defense for the Eagles. Justin Jefferson, 6 for 48. Nice to see Irv Smith get in the end zone. This is one of those guys that I was hyper-targeting in a lot of my late round draft picks. Because he just was kind of going unnoticed as this guy who got injured, didn't really have much of a sample size to go off of to see how he'd play this season. And he's so far so good. You know, like, I don't think that there's too much to worry about there. Flipping over to the Eagles side, you have Jalen Hurts, 26 for 31, 333, 1 and 1. So Jalen Hurts had a very good game. He had 2 scores on the ground on like 11 for 57. And then 2 touchdowns. You had Miles Sanders, 17 for 80. Again, this is one of those contests where it just really kind of fell out of reach right away. Eagles marched down the field, scored, and it didn't look good from the get-go. Dallas Goedert, 5 for 82. He's going to have those flashy type games, but I really do think that moving forward, it's going to be the A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith show. This was probably game time or game script dependent. Devontae Smith, 7 for 80. A.J. Brown, 5 for 69. Big cool-off week for A.J. Brown. I wouldn't expect this to be an every week type of thing. Exploded in week 1. I think you're going to have the very same thing happen here in week 3. So that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, if you like today's content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Helps out a ton, but I'll catch you in the next one. See you.